Thank you. Uh, I see we are back just by indication again to ensure that I'm still not talking to people who are sleeping. If
I see
you
we are
can
back,
just indicate that
just-
you are back, whether however way, so that because I'm back. Anybody?
Just by
Khanyisa Lebogang, Michelle, Mohodi, Mpendulo, Lethando, Thabiseng, Oratil, Refil, Robin, Sbongile, Simon, Vincent, Vilma, Bongan. Anybody? Oh, I see a show of hands. A show of hand. Okay. Thank you. That's good enough for me. Where two or more are gathered, or something along those lines. There, I am there with them. Do you know that verse? Anyway, thank you very much for coming back. I thought we had a morning session which was quite fruitful. I was actually telling someone earlier on that, you know, with that session in itself, we've discussed the gist of this whole program, being, you know, accountable, ethical leadership. But I spoke about King 4. But before King 4, there was King 2 and 3. I've told you what they were for and what they were about. Let me just go in now and explain the provisions of it. And you'll note that most of it were covered during our session. So what I propose to do now is that I'll just run through them, especially the ones that we need to know. And you'll see that most, well, you would be forgiven to assume that most of them are directed at corporate. However, that's not the case, because King 4 specifically speaks about people in our space being NPOs, and how we account, and specifically mentions us in the venture of ethical leadership. But be as it may, so before King 4, there was King 2 and 3. I've spoken to about 1992, and the one King 3, I forgot the date, and 2016. So King 3, basically the difference between King 3 and King 4 is that, and I'll explain to you what apply versus apply and explain mean. It introduced something called sector supplements. So sector supplements is divided into various sectors. So this is, I've written them there. Municipalities, for our interest is NPOs. Non-profit organizations, retirement funds, small and medium enterprises, state-owned enterprises. So it developed in those sectors which were previously not there. It then went further into executive remuneration. A debate again for another day as to whether remuneration packages for executives are what they should be or are where they should be, meaning they're too high, that is. So it introduced more transparency in that, as to how one arrives at that. But like I said, we're not going to get into that for our purposes. So, for example, the government body is, just to read, is required to disclose a remuneration by means of a remuneration report in 3 parts. And these 3 parts are set out: background, overview, and the implementation. Something we also spoke about is the independence of directors. So that goes to then directors with vested interest that we spoke about earlier, in saying that, are you being told by your stakeholder, your advertiser, what to do? Are you that independent as a shareholder? Social and ethics committee, the establishment of them. And within your space, you know, we spoke about committees that were there already. So I suppose with these principles, one can look at how you can factor them in, if I'm assuming you don't have them already. is then a group governance framework. I spoke about a policy, so that will govern your framework as to how who assumes what responsibility, and who ensures who does what, and who ensures the framework, and who ensures the reporting lines. So effectively and we're going to get into these one by one, by the way, but I'm just giving you the gist of the changes between the two, and accepting that you are all not legal people. We can't really get into a debate about it. One of the things was that it also recognized information technology as leveraging information to enhance an organization's intellectual capital. So I think that's what sticks to mind for me, if how you can leverage information to enhance the organization's growth. So you may the intellectual capital of that organization. How does it develop, and how does it invest in its intellectual capacity through the information technology? Again, a big issue we touched on was organizational ethics. So what it requires is that you publish an organizational code of conduct and policies on the organization's website. So they will speak to issues of, we spoke about this at length, who does what, when, how do you engage with the pastors, how do you engage with other advertisers, how do you engage with municipality, how do you engage with politicians. Stakeholder engagement. The governing body, and I'm going to go a bit deeper into this, governing body should exercise ongoing oversight of stakeholder relationship management, and in particular, there's, amongst others, methodologies for identifying stakeholders, formal mechanics for stakeholder management, and measurement of quality material stakeholder relationship. I think from our perspective, I don't think there's more that can be said here. We spoke about stakeholders, we spoke about how do we manage specific relations within our space, particularly the ones that were inherently conflictual. And when I mean inherently conflictual, I mean one always wants to achieve not necessarily opposite ends, but ends that are not particularly aligned. You want to advertise and inform, I want to advertise and maximize profit. One of the other things it's speaking about is also responsible investing. So in our instance, responsible investing would be we take advertisers based on what the SA code says, based on advertisers who won't come and spread falsehoods about the effects and the abilities of their products. We take in advertisers who are responsible in their nature, who are not calling for the killing of specific people or of certain things. One of the things which it did is that it introduced non-profit organizations. So I did say that before there was no specific reference, but now they are recognized and can be incorporated in various forms, like charitable trust, voluntary association, club, or fund. It applies to all non-profit organizations such as ourselves. And the reporting and the resources that were previously applicable to corporate entities are also applicable to NPOs. Effectively, the supplement on the NPOs are to achieve added credibility and enhance reputation, increase impact on activity and advocacy through stakeholder relationship, access to funding, grants, loans, and better terms, the ability to leverage wider pool of expertise of employment or volunteer work, better fraud prevention due to improved controls, business continuity and arrangements permit the NPO to operate under conditions of volatility and withstand and recover from acute shock, leader continuity through succession planning. I'll again, it's like we're anticipating all of this because we spoke at length about succession, the planning, and what we would necessarily need in our organization to achieve all those things. And I think the takeout was that ethical leadership that we spoke of, and leading from the heart, and that is what we do. So, Musikurar FM, I see your hand. You can go. Okay, I'm not sure what was happening then. So, what are the consequences of non-compliance with the good practices of the King Code? It's not, you are not bound by law to comply with it. However, if you are a listed organization, you are bound by listing requirements to have everything that it says you must have. However, in our instances, we are not intending to be listed, so I'm not going to get into that. However, the main point that we should be concerned with is that if we ever find ourselves in court for some or other misdeed in relation to governance, one of the things that the court may consider in how we conducted ourselves are the principles espoused or outlined in the King Code, and see that did we act according to best practice in the instance, and we might end up in trouble. So whilst in law there's no legal requirement to there's no legal requirement except for if you are trying to get listed on the JSE. You must consider them even binding on your organization, because if you are ever faced, everyone is always litigating against everyone. You might find yourself having to answer based on the conditions, not conditions, but on the practices that are placed there, and you haven't really answered according to them. I know we're moving slightly faster than in the morning, but like I keep saying, most of the things were already covered. So what are these 17 principles that we are looking at? And we will go into, of the 17, you'll note that most of them we've already covered. So it has 17 principles. These principles are taken from the King 4 report on corporate governance, which has become a standard for good governance in South Africa. These principles are linked and divided into groups by a common theme or concept. And you'll see once we get into them what I mean with that. So the first theme that we speak of is leadership, ethics, and citizenship. The first thing that it says is that the governing body should lead ethically and effectively. What that effectively means is that you must, we spoke about that again at length, but what you must basically do is that they must describe how the leadership will be held accountable. They must cultivate and activities collectively, individually, and characteristics of integrity, competence, responsibility, accountability, fairness, and transparency. I think in our instance, we spoke about how you can be fair to stakeholders, how you can be transparent to stakeholders, such as advertisers. Just based on principle number 1, because we're going to go on all the way to principle number 17. I know we've spoken at length, and if no one wants to say anything, it's okay. If anyone wants to add on to what I've said, you can add on now, because I'll move on to principle 2. Okay, that's fine. I think we spoke at length. And then 2 So that's principle number 2. So all these are the principles of the best practices that I spoke about that sort of speak, not sort of, that speak to the governance of the organization. So principle number 2, I made notes on my phone. Principle number 2 is that the governing body should govern the ethics of the organization in a way that supports the establishment of ethical culture. I think that's self-explanatory. I think what the government body should do is effectively set the direction in the ethics of the organization and ensure that there are ways of stakeholders to be made familiar with the codes and conducts of ethics and policies. I think this point is what I wanted to raise, and I'll say it again, is that you must ensure that there are ways for stakeholders to be made familiar with the codes of conducts and ethics and policies of the organization. I think we spoke about people who come and demand certain things of us, and I think that there then we can come in and say, no, this is how this is our code of ethics, and it doesn't allow us to do that. So we've already at length spoken about principle number 2. And number 3, I suppose, is consequence management. It's saying it's all good and well to say you have all these ethics, but how you must disclose how these ethics have been managed, the focus areas, monitoring measures, and how ethical outcomes are being addressed. So if there are issues, if you do find that one of your disc jocks is taking money, is taking bribes, or is not leading is not a good corporate citizen, or is not doing things in an ethical way. Suppose point number 3 is that must be a responsible corporate citizen. Ensure that the organization is seen as a responsible citizen. That is, set the direction for good corporate citizen, include the compliance with the Constitution, laws, standards, own policies and procedures, as well as congruence with the organization's purpose and strategy. I think it goes without saying that the compliance with the laws, goes. We spoke about bribery. We spoke about how that in itself is illegal, and why you must act in a way that's legal, because if you start doing things that are illegal, not only will you not be a good corporate citizen, but what will effectively happen is that you will erode not just the principles of your own organization, but you'll also erode the principles of good governance of the country. I think this is an important point for particularly for growth, in that the principle number 4 on strategy, performance, and reporting is that the governing body should appreciate that the organization's core purpose, its risk and opportunities, strategy and business model performance, and sustainable development are all. I think it's what I was talking about earlier, of saying that we do not, as an organization, live in isolation. We do not achieve whatever it is that we achieve without that community. And that's why the model must be all interlinked. I think one of the things that we'll say about that, you must make sure that you steer and set the direction, purpose, and strategy of the organization. Your network too. Anyway, let's see how it goes, and then if it continues, just pop me a text. I'll get someone to look at it. Let me just check what's going on. Oh no, I'm still on the. But thank you very much. But like I said, most of these principles we've spoken about. It's just me speaking about the legalese, and then taking it from there. I think principle number 5 says the governing body should ensure that reports issued by the organization enable stakeholders to make informed assessment of organizational performance and its short, medium, and long-term prospects. I think if you read just certainly the 5 principles that we've gone through now, I think one of the things, the key theme you see is that it's almost saying the same thing. It's almost speaking to this accountable leadership. It's talking about one who's accountable to both the community, the stakeholders, internal and external, as well as advertisers. So I think the point that one makes is that not one stakeholder is bigger than the other. You each depends on one in order to exist. So there's no one who is an absolute authority with absolute power. The managing board, and I know we're using board here in broad terms, but even the managing board within our stations is that it is the custodian of good governance, in the sense that the governing body should serve as a focal point and a custodian of corporate governance in the organization. It must execute leadership role, have character, approve protocol for it. Its committees, members get professional advice, approve protocol for non-executive members, get documentation, meetings, management. I think we've also, in as much as we were not, some of us have been living through these principles, even without knowing about what they say in these committees and approving protocol. I said there was a committee that approves certain things within a specific station. So I think that's all really it requires. Principle number 7 is that the governing body should comprise of the appropriate balance of knowledge, skills, experience, diversity, independence for it to discharge its governance role and responsible objectively and effectively. I think I'll stop here and speak about why diversity and inclusion is specifically important in this context. You don't want to, in your board, take, I may not be from Kuruman, for example, and then always having me talking about issues from Kuruman. I think whilst my view would be important, but I think the appropriate balance of knowledge, skills, and experience, diversity, and independence, both in the board itself, people who know about the community, people who know who are the irresponsible corporate citizens, people who know about that community and the diversity. But I suppose some of it will not be within our powers in this platform. But I think it's always good to keep in mind that in whatever it is that we do, all voices matter. Particularly, I spoke about voice, especially the voices we disagree with. Because that is when they might teach us a thing or two. I think effectively, principle number 8 also speaks about the accountability of the board. The governing body should ensure that its arrangements for delegation within its own structures promote independent judgment and assist with the balance of power and the effective discharge of duties. I'll link this to the adverts where you say who within the governing structure is responsible for what. Must always be is the responsibility of the board, and it must show that whoever is doing this is effective. For example, we spoke about the politics in all aspects of life, in saying that if we've outsourced it to a different community, what if that community starts off well, but now eventually approves or disapproves whatever it is that they are approving, based on considerations other than the considerations that we know of. So there must be, for example, a committee responsible for the nomination of members of the governing body, a committee responsible for risk governance, a committee responsible for remuneration. That won't really be applicable to us. Social and ethics committee I've already spoken about. And then point number 9, speaks about the board performance evaluation. One of, according to Advocate Kakan, one of I'll use my own words, the pet peeves of the human body or your human minds is self-reflection, in that the board, us as management, we must always ensure that we evaluate our own performance based on what we've said. The governing body should ensure that evaluation of its own performance, of its committee, its chair, and its individual members support the continued improvement of its performance and effectiveness. I think that one, as far as I'm concerned, is self-explanatory. I know I'm sort of moving faster than this morning, but as it's coming out, most of the stuff was discussed almost at great length this morning. If anything comes up from our discussion, you can raise your hand. I see there's a note here. Then we'll take it from there. Principle number 10. The governing body should ensure that the appointment of and the delegation to management contribute to a role, clarity, and effective exercise of authority. For example, a COO appointment and role, the delegation of their powers, the professional corporate governance services to the governing body. Now, if it speaks to CEOs, it's also speaking to us, who is a station manager. How is the delegation of his own authority? How are you held accountable as a station manager? How are you, if you take certain decisions, do you take those decisions at your whim, or do you take those decisions based on certain guiding principles? And I think if there's any homework to be done today, is to, if anything at all, find out what those policies say in our instance. I think I'm looking at this quotation here, and I think we spoke about it at length, which was said by the former president of India, who said that corruption is the enemy of development and the good governance. It must be got rid of. Both at government and the people at large must come together and achieve this national objective. I think we spoke at length about how it erodes development. I think there's no you don't even need to be a philosopher or go even deeper than thinking about someone who gets a tender and not only does not do it, but does not care about doing it because he knows that there are no consequence management around it. Within the same breath, if you get an advertiser who gets into the station and says whatever they want because they think they can get away with it, that's also the way. Sorry. That is also something that one must get rid of. Principle 11 is that the governing body should govern risk in a way that supports the organization in setting and achieving its strategic objectives. We spoke about, and that's why I was grateful to that example, that risk will always be there. The risk and the temptation to pay for a story that CNN wants is there. But however, there should be mechanisms within the organization to ensure that no matter how great the temptation, if one is overcome by that temptation, almost always they can defer back to the principles within the organization and these principles, and certainly see how the long-term effects of that is not great for the strategic objectives and for the good corporate governance on the organization. I think management must then oversee risk management within the organization, of saying, so it is the duty of management to come up with those issues of saying, how do we manage risk within the organization? How do we flag certain risks? How do we, and we certainly highlighted one, but I'm assuming, in fact, I don't assume, I know as a fact, there are plenty others within that space. We spoke about technology and information governance and how one could leverage on it. So principle number 12 is that the governing body should govern technology and information in the way that supports the organization setting an objective, setting and achieving its strategic objectives. So leverage on what you have. If there's social media, you leverage on that. If there's any kind of technology, you leverage on that. You set the approach and approve the policy on technology. What is the policy? As a worker of that station, can I just tweet whatever I like whilst I represent that organization? Can I handle information that I find on the laptop? For example, if we live either on good or bad terms, do I just go and get my memory stick and take all the information out? Obviously it's not, but management must be on top of all those issues. You must oversee the results management and implementation, including integration of business relations, monitoring and cybersecurity, social media risk, third-party and outsourced service provider risk. I think all those are issues we also spoke about, and it's issues I'm speaking of now. And we spoke about social media and what the dangers are within that policy. So in other organizations, for example, when you work for them, you undertake that if you're gonna be working for us, you will not do certain things within your social media space. Granted, we respect that it is your space, but we will not allow you, for example, to tweet hate, to tweet this, to tweet that people are always falling for, that we see every day. Principle number 13 is compliance governance. So I spoke about the SAA, the code. So you identify, and I know yesterday you identified legislative provisions which are necessarily applicable to within your space. So you then do a risk assessment of which one poses the highest risk and why, and then you comply with whatever you need to comply with. And in our case, you must comply with the ICASA regulation, Advertising Standards Authority, the Broadcasting Complaints Commission, if you've signed the code, and you must ensure that your station jocks or your announcers and whoever's working for the station always is ensure that they comply with that. There's remuneration governance, which is an interesting one. The governing body should ensure that the organization remunerates fairly, responsibly, transparently, so as to promote and achieve the strategic objectives, positive outcome in short, medium, and long-term goals. So, bans and why. I understand that in our space it might be a bit liquid in saying that you might get someone from a specific thing, but certainly in an organization, it's equal work for equal pay, people used to say. So there must always be transparency within the organization of how and why certain remunerations are made and to who. Principle number 15 is assurance. In fact, this is another self-reflection one. The governing body should ensure that assurance services and functions enable effective control and that these support the integrity information for internal decision-making of the organization external reports. I don't know how we relate to this, but I know in corporate that there are internal audits that when we're coming down to this point number 15, is that we were going on about how you must set up certain structures for reporting. But then once you've done that, what you then want to do is that you want to go back and see, I've done all of this. Now there must be an internal audit to say, okay, someone who's independent, we spoke about independence, but who must then check against the principles that I said I will do. So in this instance, the internal audit as well as external audit, and you might need, if you are not staying off, for example, you might need external assurance reports. There was an example made that had they gone with that, maybe they wouldn't be in as much problems. I'm just wanting to see if there's any inside the external independently review every 5 years. So ensure that the internal audit externally and independently reviewed every 5 years. Ensure that internal audit makes annual statement and effective governance, risk and management controls. Monitor that internal audit follows a risk-based plan, reviews the risk profile regularly, and I spoke about that. So the risk profile will be based on how you've highlighted your risks. For example, in mining, there's something called a license to operate. So in all the risks that you might have, there might be one risk that if you highlight it as, you might use color coding like other organizations do. If you say, for example, if we are caught doing this, not complying with these specific provisions, we might even be kicked out we might lose our license to operate, which means that is the highest form of risk, and we must be vigilant in ensuring that we remain compliant. I know it sounds like a lot, but we one of the things which we spoke about earlier was that the foundation is to achieve those 4 pillars that we spoke about. And you can hear that if one is just attached to ethical leadership, one will always come out on top with these issues. Stakeholder relationships. So this is the last sort of pillar. And it says, in the execution of governance roles and responsibilities, the governing body should adopt a stakeholder-inclusive approach that balances the needs, interests, and expectations of material stakeholders of the organization over time. There is direct stakeholders, there is delegate stakeholders, there is shareholder management, there is the government in our instances, there is the listeners, there is the advertisers. So the shareholders, we spoke about this quite a bit. So the stakeholder management is telling the municipalities, this is what we do, this is what we cannot do. And if anyone gets out of line and does what is not supposed to be done, we ensure that we go back and we hold them accountable based on our principles. And the Constitution says, Section 36 says all laws must be laws of general application. So it won't be a witch hunt. It'll just be we're holding someone of general application, no matter who you are. If you've done a specific thing in contravention of these principles, whether we've brought these principles back into the organization, or it's these specific principles that we've elected that we are going to be governed by, there must be a way in which we manage those stakeholder relationships, and we hold those who put them at risk to account. And the last one is responsible investing. The governing body of an institutional investor or organization should ensure that responsible investment is practiced by the organization to promote good governance and creation of values by the companies in which it invests. I know this sounds like it doesn't apply to us, but it does, in that you invest in your relationships in advertising, for example, in saying, who do you advertise? Are they based on the ethos of your station, or is it me who's trying to advertise something that's illegal? Do I just take something that's illegal because I'm just trying to raise funds? Do I take, for example, we spoke about prophets and pastors. I don't know the difference. We say they come and say, they might do certain things. We spoke about Bitcoin people who say they might, I don't know what they said in context, but I think the idea was that when they come back, the people complain that they have not done what they said they will do. So I think we need to be responsible in both protecting the image and the integrity of our organization, be it a newspaper or a station, and then in ensuring that we protect the integrity also of the listener. How it links with the Companies Act as well as the Electronic Communications and Transactions Act, I think it's reporting. Basically, it allows us to it calls upon us to report. The minister will then report to Parliament, and Parliament is effectively, at least in theory, a representative of the whole public of the South African community. Certainly proportional voting, it is. So that's accountability. So that's who we are ultimately accountable to, and that would be our community. The Companies Act also requires the same. In fact, that's a discussion for another day, in how you regulate a company. But we were just speaking about the code of good ethics, if you may, on the King codes and what the 17 principles effectively require of us to do. And we have espoused these principles and we spoke about them at length. And if there's anything else, this is who I am. And I'm open. We can continue either a discussion, or if there's something you saw earlier you'd like to say something about that, you can say that. Or other than that, I can say my thank yous and I can release everyone. I hope I've allowed everyone to speak. Is everyone sleeping?
Just to voice our appreciation for the lesson. Hello?
We can hear you. Thank you.
Just to voice our appreciation. Very well done. You taught us before you taught us. So it was very good to involve us first in that lengthy different discussions, because when the theory came, then we understood it much better. So very well done. You taught something. Thank you.
That was the whole point. I'm grateful. Thank you. Mohodi Community Radio, I see you unmuted. You're just telling me that you're not sleeping.
Yes, thank you very much. No, we're not sleeping. Hello?
We can hear you.
Hello?
We can hear.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is Matalam. Okay, it's Matalam Mehala from Mohodi FM. We'd like to thank you and appreciate very much for the presentation. You have taught us so much about accountability, ethics, and responsibility. And I think we would try very much to apply what we have learned. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think it all goes to stakeholder management, and we do that. And I see Mxolisi also wants to say something.
Yeah, I would also like to thank you so much for enlightening us. Some of the things here I didn't know, and I also like to ask colleagues that are here who have those policies that are assisting them at the station to share, because honestly, some of us are new in the industry and we don't have those policies in place. It would be nice to, have a something that guides us in terms of making people adhere to certain rules, because sometimes we find ourselves on a corner, we can't escape certain things, and now we have to account. And I'm talking to the gentleman from I'm not sure his name, but he was talking a lot about policies that are guiding the station. I'd like to ask him if he can share.
Okay, I will ask him, but also what I will also undertake to do is that I will ask the agency to also just pick up that point, because it's not only you that has raised it. It's a few people that have raised that point, and I think I'll obviously it's good to share experiences as a community, but I think in the ultimate accountability, the agency also needs to ensure that you have all the right tools to account to it firstly, and to account to your stakeholders. I see Lebuchang and I see Gama.
Oh, can I start?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Gyalebu and Yablela. It's Padco on behalf of Ulebohang in Tagalani Community Radio.
Oh.
As Tagalani Community Radio, we appreciate your time, also the platform that we've been getting as a community radio station. Another issue that I want to raise, because I was listening the whole time, we also managed to put it live on air for some of the people who don't know things about how to run the NGO or the NPOs. So the thing that I want to raise, I hear the colleagues, they managed to speak a lot, but as community radio station, there's nothing, no working relationship. If some of the NGO need assistance in terms of applying or in terms of what can I say, how to run the company, someone's going to say, no, we can't help those people, or I can't help, it's going to take my position if ever I can. Who knows? Some of the people who are inside, they know nothing. So I can appreciate if, as the management, we can share the information inside the institution so that everyone can have that information. Either way, attend the workshop, they are going to ask him, tell us about your community or your NGO. What are you doing? What is the mission and the vision? So some people, they don't know all those things. Thank you very much, my chief.
Sabo. Next, I see Lebohang. Okay, there is Musi, and then there's Lebohang. I think those are the last ones. I think Gama also had his hand up. I think he...
Thank you very much, Musi from Kurara. Also, like the other team members, I'd just like to thank you for this presentation. It's an eye-opening presentation, and we as a radio station, we are also working at improving our policies. I think in about a week or two. I think in about a week or two, we'll start the processes of relooking into our policies, whether they up to standard for the current time. So it would be, we would appreciate it if you can share these policies with us so that we can benchmark within the industry. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's perfect. I think you can just go. If I don't know if the hands were up initially, or Lebohang, you done, and then Uratil, I think you haven't said anything.
Hello, hi.
Hi.
My name is Oratile. I am a social media manager at SCFM. I'm really grateful for this presentation. It really opened up my eyes. I'm new to the company, so I think we have a lot of work to do, and I'm pretty excited for the changes that we're going to do. So thank you very much. Are you able to share the presentation with us?
Yes, I am. It'll go through your offices. But what I'll do is that I can do a pack. I can do both the presentation along with the King Code, because what I done for my presentation purposes, you would have noted that I just took snippets of it for discussion purposes. I can share the presentation as long as the code itself, but I can't do that immediately. You'll probably get that sometime during the week or next week.
Yeah.
All right.
Nicholas, if I can just interject, please, sorry. So can you please share all the documents with us, and then we will then circulate to the comrades?
Yes, that's fair. That's my undertaking.
Yeah.
Please don't forget the King Code, please.
No, don't worry. I hope just for me, if there's no one else, just in terms of the responsibility that we hold, I don't think we must see ourselves. I see Gama's back. I don't think we must see ourselves in isolation. I think we must see ourselves as part of a bigger community, and our role, we hold so much power that when people want to take over a whole government, they first start with us, and we are even unelected. So that's quite a big responsibility, and I hope we exercise it responsibly. And once I share the documents, we it's not going to be an overnight process, but as long as it's at the back of our minds, I think I myself would be very grateful. Gama. Okay, I'm not sure what's happening. But anyway, I think from my end, I think I would be lying if I said I did not enjoy the session. It's always good, especially with the challenges of the fact that I can only see the people behind the screen here. I think you've been a great audience. I think your drive and your hunger to know these things, especially your hunger to implement them, just tells me that we are in good hands. And may you never tire. And hopefully we meet again someday in another setup where you then update me on what you've done in order to facilitate these policies. But be that as it may, it's a thank you very much for honoring me with your time from the morning until it's now 2 o'clock. And I've been keeping my eye on the numbers. We've been consistently over 30. So I'm highly honored, and I don't take that privilege lightly. And thank you very much. Thank you.
Coming up, which is tomorrow. And tomorrow's session looks at the Protection of Personal Information Act and the Cyber Crimes Act. I heard Uratile saying that she's the social media manager, and so Uratile, I think this one would do you also a lot of good if you attended it. So please do come through. Colleagues will also send the data claim form. So that we can reimburse you for the data costs incurred for attending these sessions. So either me, Kanye, or Desiree will circulate it later today. We'll also circulate a link for the post-attendance survey. So all the great comments that you guys have been putting forward, please also just put those onto that survey so that we're also able to report to the board as to the impact of these sessions. So everything will be circulated on later today, including also the presentations that we have received today. And with that, colleagues, thank you very much for your attendance. We will see you tomorrow.
Thank you.